For this project, we were tasked with making 3 entries for Participedia with 10C. So 10C is like an all-encompassing organization, and they have so many facets. So we wanted to really capture their 3 main ones. So our first article we did was on 10C as a whole. From there, we went on to talk about their community bonds, which has to do with social financing, and it's how they made their home base and how they bought their property in the first place, which is pretty amazing. And then finally, our third article is on a thing called Harvest Impact, which is also a sort of social financing, but it's more to do with a circular economy and more revolving around food. So throughout the term, we've kind of split these articles up and helped each other edit and revise. And we're working towards finishing our third one and then posting them soon on the Participedia platform in the next week.
This is probably, for me personally, the most meaningful project of all my 5 years at McMaster. I just feel like there's so much depth to this, so much learning, and just so much impact from this project.
I kind of felt like I put like my heart and soul into it a lot more because I knew that there would be an audience beyond just a professor that was there kind of reading it in order to critique me. I knew there would be an audience that could grow or learn from it. So I wanted to make sure that it was going to provide the maximum amount of value for whoever that reader would be at whatever time that reader would find the article. And so that's what made it so important and powerful, I think, for all 3 of us, is because we knew that we were going to be able to make a change, whether it's a small change or a big change. We have no idea where these articles are going to end up or whose hands they're going to be in. And so keeping that in mind as we approach the project was super important. And it also motivated us to put our best work in and to be as engaged with the project.
This is why I love community engaged teaching, because this is about taking your skills and your knowledge and the process of building that skills and knowledge and making it walk in the world, right? Taking it outside of the bubble of the university and really making this bridge to what can I do in the communities I care about, and making that bridge while you're a student so that you can then walk across it in your life after a student and say, if I want to get involved, if I want to do something, if I want to be a part of innovation in my community, I see that.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of People of Participedia, an interview series where we sit down with individuals in the Participedia network to explore their recent projects related to public participation and democratic innovation, both within Participedia and beyond. My name is Jennifer Wallace. I am speaking to you from the lands of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe, and these lands are governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum in what is currently called Canada. With me today is a fantastic group of individuals here to share their experiences in both leading and participating in a senior capstone course in community engagement and their particular project, which engaged with the Participedia platform and a community hub organization in Guelph called 10C. First off, we have Karen Balcom. Dr. Karen Balcom is a collaborator and cluster member with Participedia. She is an associate professor in history at McMaster University, in addition to teaching courses in the Gender and Social Justice program and in Integrated Business Humanities. She is also the academic director for community engaged teaching and learning with the Office of Community Engagement at McMaster. And Dr. Balcom developed the senior capstone course in which we are discussing today, and she has a great deal of insight from the teaching perspective of today's topic. We also have Dr. Emily Scherzinger with us today. Emily is both a co-developer and teaching lead on the course in focus today, and she has some very insightful perspectives as someone working directly with the student team and project. And of course, we have all 3 members of the student team here today, Christina Hall, Rachel West, and Sami Puri. All 3 are in their final year or just finishing up their undergraduate degree in Integrated Business and Humanities at McMaster. And they're here today to tell us about their experience with Participedia and their community work involving 10C. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. So we will start with Dr. Karen Balcom. Dr. Balcom, could you provide us an overview of the senior capstone course in community engagement that you've been leading and the sort of collaboration with 10C through this course?
I'm happy to do that. So I co-created this course with Emily Scherzinger. It was created, as you noted, to be a capstone course inside a really unique degree program at McMaster called Integrated Business and Humanities. And that is a program where students combine a traditional training in business with a kind of untraditional deep melding with the humanities, and within that, a considerable focus on social entrepreneurship, community engagement, and social justice. So what we were trying to do is to pull those things together in a course. Now, I came at that also from two other places. One of them is that I am a collaborator in the Participedia project, and I'm also the academic director for teaching and learning at our Office of Community Engagement. So this course was a triangulation of those three things. Use the skills of students who are senior students with fantastic skills in the humanities and in business, direct a community engagement process and course that was deeply embedded in our treasured values of community engagement. And that's where this came from. This is the first year we taught this course, so we were trying to lay out a pattern that we could replicate in other places. And specifically, the kind of collaboration we built between a specific community organization, 10C, and creating entries for Participedia is something we want to replicate in future years. But part of that process of building out that vision, and eventually what we want to do is we want to create a series of entries from Participedia that will in particular document the really amazing community activism and democratic innovation that's happening in the city where our university is located and in the surrounding area. So that's Hamilton, Ontario, and surrounding area. To have kind of a demonstration of that, we thought it was really important to start with an organization with which we already had an existing relationship. And so for us, that was 10C, Space for Change. Why was it important to start with a relationship? Because the organization had to trust us and feel like they had a good idea going in, that we would deal with their material carefully, and that they would have good oversight, and that we really could co-create. So foundation number one was this existing relationship. So what is 10C, Space for Change? Really very interesting organization in the small city of Guelph, Ontario. It would describe itself under a category that a lot of people would recognize as placemaking. More specifically, they are a physical location, a hub, a building in the downtown of the city that they fill with change makers from nonprofit organizations, also some for-profit businesses that are engaged in this process of change making. And change making or placemaking for 10C looks an awful lot like democratic participation and citizen engagement. So that's where we began. And we built this project based on a pre-existing relationship, put it inside the container of this senior research seminar, and set the students going on some of the goals that I know Emily has outlined. Now, what we did was in some ways specific to these Integrated Business and Humanities courses, specific to a McMaster context for community engagement, but the principle of what we're doing here, which is build a relationship with the community organization, use Participedia as a platform to share the really good work of that organization with the community, and use that to train students around understanding, recording, and communicating and participating in really amazing examples of community development and democratic participation. That's something that we hope other people will pick up.
That's fantastic. Really interesting course. And I like that there's sort of a short-term and a long-term path for what the students are doing here and that you're doing with designing the course. Emily, could you share with us how you conceived of this project for the students, sort of the desired learning outcomes of the project and how it melds with the course, and then perhaps how you guided the students in this collaboration with 10C and Participedia?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess I should start with developing the course. When Karen and I joined forces to construct this course, we really wanted to center community engagement and social entrepreneurship. And I think it was really important for us to ensure that the students leading the Integrated Business and Humanities program had some sense of civic responsibility with their very interesting and innovative degree. So we wanted to bring together community partners specifically that might not have funding or might not have the time to engage in some sort of project that they've been meaning to. So we reached out to a bunch of community partners, and one of them was 10C, and they graciously came with 2 ideas, 2 projects, and we ended up engaging with Participedia and kind of joining these 2 projects of 10C and building a Participedia presence together. So that was really important to us, and I think also important to the students in the course. They were introduced to 10C at the beginning of their degree, and they got to kind of see it come full circle with the 10C Participedia group, because they are so like self-driven, so intelligent, and just really great writers. It honestly feels like I didn't have to direct them in this collaboration that much. And I think that speaks volumes to the people who have been working in this project, but also to their education in this department in Integrated Business and Humanities. Mostly, I think what was important was bringing a sense of 10C to Participedia that could be used as a source of inspiration for other organizations who are looking on Participedia and might be interested in building a community bonds program or a shared space.
Okay, so I'll direct this question to Rachel. Rachel, from what I understand of the project, you sought to integrate principles of community engagement throughout your work. This is a part of the course. So could you speak to the principles that you actually focused on and sort of how you implemented and maintained them throughout the work of the project?
So for us, it was really important to be integrating these principles, and it was a great opportunity to put into practice principles that we actually learned in the first year of this program in our first class with Dr. Balcom. So it was really great to be able to kind of put those into action. And while we learned in first year that kind of all of the principles are important and present in every community engagement project, there were 2 key ones that we focused on with our work with 10C that we thought were most applicable to the project. And the first one is relationships, which Dr. Balcom already kind of spoke to a little bit in her response to your question. I think that we had the privilege, of course, of building off of an existing relationship that Dr. Balcom had with 10C. So that was definitely a bonus when starting the project. But we wanted to make sure that within those first few meetings with 10C, we were really getting to understand each other, what our goals were, how they wanted to approach the project, what they were comfortable with, what they weren't comfortable with, how they kind of wanted to showcase the organization, and what they wanted to get out of the Participedia entries that we would be creating. And so establishing this trust and kind of mutual respect at the beginning of the process was really important as we headed on into the later elements of the process and you get into more of the details and the nitty-gritty. So establishing that relationship off the bat was super important. And then the second one that I think was huge was openness to learning. Participedia was a brand new platform to all of the students, and it was also a brand new platform to 10C. And so coming into the project, both groups didn't have a strong understanding on what the potential possibilities were with Participedia entries. And so it was our job to kind of share with them what we had learned about Participedia, what Emily would be able to tell us about Participedia. And then we also had to be open to learning on our own end about 10C as an organization. While we knew what they were, what they stood for, we'd had a couple talks from them before, we were definitely going into a lot more depth with this project than we had ever before with the organization. And so it was definitely a mutual back and forth of learning. And I think also acknowledging that openness to learning happens throughout the project. It's not just at the beginning. Throughout kind of each iteration of each article, we had to be open to feedback and kind of making revisions as we went along in order to make sure that the final outcome of these articles was going to be the best quality work possible, but also that the relationship could be the best relationship possible.
Thank you for that. I think that's a really important point, that these principles need to be maintained throughout the entirety of the project, not just at the outset and not just at the end when you remember that you need to engage with them, but it sounds like you focused on maintaining these principles throughout the entirety. So that's fantastic. We'll move to the next question here, and I'll direct this to Christina. So Christina, what types of methods, perhaps sources or strategies What did you use in researching and writing the Participedia entries themselves?
Rachel touched on earlier, we had a great relationship with the 10C team. So they were obviously our primary resource, and we were able to contact them on a bi-weekly basis and set up meetings, or whenever we needed, or through Slack, which was very important for getting their like firsthand knowledge on the case. And other than that, if we weren't to have access to that, they had endless information on their company websites of their like mission statements and reports that, you know, gave us a lot of information, or sometimes even our people that we were working with, like Jess and Julia, would just link a report and say, you can find this here. It's all there for you. Copy the text, do whatever you need to. And I think that that was very important for us to be able to learn ourselves what information was important to put on the Participedia page. It was very helpful to get the structure from other cases. I know that Dr. Balcom linked us other Participedia cases and organization ones, so we could kind of get an idea of what these would look like. And at the end of the day, it wasn't as hard, I think, as we thought it would be to follow the flow and follow the structure. And I think that in a meeting that we had just earlier this week, it was kind of exciting to fill out these different paragraphs and to really be like, wow, I know so much about the organization, and this work is important because it can go beyond just our school focus. So yeah, I would say our sources would be the organization itself, the reports that they would put out, and then kind of just external knowledge, like what are community bonds and what is a harvest impact fund and how does this circular economy work and things like that. So all good resources for us.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like you all really tapped into the network available to you and that you developed, and that the course and Karen has developed over time. So that's really great. And the last question here is for Sami. Sami, did you encounter as a group any significant challenges in completing the project, and how did you navigate these challenges throughout the work?
I think there were two, I would say, major challenges that we did encounter and have to overcome. The first one definitely was working with a brand new platform. As Rachel previously mentioned, Participedia is very, very new to us, as it is to most of the IBH students. And so this challenge came with multiple kind of aspects or facets to it. So firstly, it was just understanding how Participedia worked and, you know, the types of entries that come with it, or trying to figure out what would be the best type of entry and what would be the best information to even highlight when it comes to that entry. Because of course we wanted to make sure that we were highlighting 10C in the best way possible and communicating their efforts in the most effective way possible. This also definitely kind of came with grasping the depth of the impact that Participedia can have. So from our early conversations with Jess and Julia, who are our 10C community partners, we did understand that kind of the goal or the intention that 10C has at this point is to be this source of knowledge for other maybe social entrepreneurs or organizations or institutions that are striving to do similar things in their communities. And so we know that Participedia can be really impactful in getting that information across and getting that knowledge across. And so grasping that depth of impact that's possible was definitely really important, and definitely a challenge, I would say, because we wanted to make sure at that point that we're communicating everything in the best way possible. So to overcome that, I would say that we really just made sure that we understood the heart and the intention behind 10C as well as Participedia. We did a lot of research on previous entries on the platform. We had countless meetings with 10C, and just like Christina was saying, messaging them on Slack to really understand. They would send us a piece of information and we would just come back with why. Or like why, and we would have these documents with questions for them, and it would be like 30 to 40 questions that we covered with them in a 1-hour meeting. And so we really just wanted to make sure that we were getting as much information as possible. And then the second struggle that I would say, or just kind of the challenge that we encountered, is just learning about concepts that we had previously not heard of or just were not super familiar with. So circular economy or social finance. And these were things that we may have heard of before, but were never really very especially knowledgeable about. And so writing those articles on the social finance, we had to realize that well, we have to understand it properly ourselves, because we're essentially using the Participedia platform as a knowledge hub for others. And we can't provide knowledge to somebody else if we don't fully understand the concept ourselves. And so we definitely had to do a lot of external research, like Christina was saying, on understanding those concepts ourselves to be able to really add value to Participedia from the 10C perspective. But yeah, I would say that really was a lot of just collaboration with the community partners and external research, and just like Rachel was saying, being open to learning, because this entire process has been an immense amount of learning for all three of us.
That's really great to hear that, though sort of daunting at first, daunting to capture the depth of an organization or a case, can be a little intimidating, that you managed to do it. You were able to do it with a whole lot of hard work and research, but it did happen. And I think that's a really important lesson, that this depth can be captured with effective community engagement and research. You can capture this even from outside the organization if you're not directly involved in that work. All right, so we'll move to our final question, which is for all three members of the student team here. So the question is, what is the biggest lesson you learned or the greatest takeaway from your experience completing this community engaged project? So we'll go in the same order. We'll start with Rachel.
This lesson that I learned from my experience completing this project is to kind of always be open to new experiences and learning. At the beginning of the course, we had the opportunity to pick a few projects that we might be interested in working on. And they covered a wide variety of different topics, some that I was super knowledgeable on, and some like Participedia that I never worked with before or even knew existed. And I was hesitant because of my unfamiliarity with the Participedia platform, but I wanted to have the opportunity to try something new and different. And so I definitely think that a learning for me, looking back and having such a positive experience with that new experience, was that in my life, definitely want to be more open to learning about new things. I think it comes back to like, you don't know what you don't know. And so many things like Participedia exist out there that I think students aren't always aware of. And so my learning, and probably what I would say to other students, is continue to seek opportunities that are outside of your comfort zone or outside of your sphere of knowledge. And the main lesson for myself, and what I would say to other students who are potentially exploring new projects or opportunities, is to definitely keep your eyes open, be open to new platforms, opportunities, ways of collaboration, because you never know what can come out of it, and you never know what you might learn.
Fantastic. We will go to Christina next.
So I think a huge thing for this project was learning that what you put in is what you get out. And I think that hopefully you can tell that we were all like quite invested in the topic of 10C and really enjoyed the collaboration that took place. But some of these meetings that we had like our prepared list of questions, and oftentimes it would go on random tangents, or we'd start talking about information to do with 10C, but that had nothing to do with our reports. And I think that some of those were the most important conversations, because we kind of got to learn the personality behind these organizations. And if we had been, stuck to a very strict schedule and been very one-track minded for the specific assignment at hand, then we wouldn't have developed those relationships more. And I don't think I would have appreciated this project as much. I feel like other projects in school, it's very easy to finish them and then kind of wipe your hands clean of it and move on. But I do think this is a project that I'll think about in the future, and hopefully I can maintain those connections with the people at 10C and with the people at Participedia. So yeah, I think you really have to appreciate what you're given, and if you want to do more with a project, then do it, and it's in your hands.
That's a really important lesson, and we're happy to keep you in the network of Participedia as well. All right, lastly, we have Sami, your response to your biggest lesson or takeaway.
This one's difficult because I feel like I've learned so much, but I think the biggest one would be just that you can always grow more. I think that has to do with the fact that when I did pitch myself for this specific project, I thought, you know, like I have a lot of strengths that I can bring to this project when it comes to writing or relationship management and just communication. And I still stand by that. I think IBH is such a great program because we've been exposed to so many really different and unique things that we've learned so much as students in the last like 4 or 5 years. Plus, some of us are fifth year students, some of us here are fourth year students. And I think going in, like I definitely had the kind of idea that I'm like, oh, you know, like I've learned all that I can learn in the last 5 years. And coming in, even though it seems really simple, but I've learned so much more and grown so much more as a writer and a communicator and just somebody who's trying to manage and, you know, just keep and build and foster relationships. And so I think like really the biggest lesson that I've learned is that you can always learn more, you can always grow more. You're never at, you know, your peak. And if you think you are, then that's a really closed-minded stance to take, because you should always, like Rachel was saying, be open to learning. It's such an incredible opportunity to get to do really interactive projects like this. And so as great as you think you are at one skill or another, and I'm sure everybody is great at their skills, but there's just so much more growth that can come from just being open to learning.